And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host, Sara DiVello, and I am so excited to connect you with LA Times crime reporter IRL in real life turned thriller author James Queally, aka Jay Quizzical, here to give us the inside scoop on his brand new book, All These Ashes. James, welcome to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about this book.
That Instagram handle coming back to haunt me was not what I expected, but let's go.
James, I told you I do research.
You know what?
I'm ready.
Walked into that, deserved it. I respect that jab out the gate. Hi, I am Jay Quizzical, which is a stupid nickname from Newark that we might get into at some point. My actual name is James Queally. I am the author of All These Ashes, which is the second novel in my Russell Avery series, which is basically not too divorced from my own life, except for all of the punching that I don't do in actual reporting. But it's largely follows the story of Russell Avery, who is a former reporter in Newark, New Jersey, former crime reporter at a fictional newspaper there. He has been laid off and finds himself functioning with a kind of like a PI in name only. Really, he's just doing favors for cops that are in trouble, kind of almost acting as an investigator to help them out of internal affairs beefs. He gets fed up with that and starts looking into issues of police misconduct, which tends to get him in significant trouble with both the police and the people thereafter. The second book largely follows him trying to unravel a cold case investigation where a police officer who was a previous rival of his in his reporter life is now under the impression that someone he arrested in this brutal cold case arson murder actually was innocent, and they're kind of in a race to clear his name before the man dies of a terminal illness.
Whoa. James, you just took us on a roller coaster ride, and I am here for it. I can't wait to get into every delicious detail. But first, we're already getting likes and hearts up from Facebook. Thanks, fam. First, I just want to welcome everyone. If you're watching with us on Facebook, if you're watching on YouTube, my channels, Murder by the Books channels, Mystery and Thriller Mavens Facebook group, wherever you are, you're in the right place. This is the right time. If you've been here before, you know how it works. This is your time to ask this real life crime reporter anything you want. Ask him about his beat. Ask him about his writing. Ask him about his book. Ask him about the difference between newspaper writing and book reporting. We're going to get newspaper reporting and book writing. We're going to get into all of that and more, but this is your time. So get those questions going in the comments. I want to welcome Vicky, Jean, want to welcome Irma, want to welcome everyone watching on YouTube. Let us know what you would like to. Hey, Linda, good to have you. Let us know what you would like to ask. Now, James, this book is getting crazy good praise. S.A. Cosby raving. James Queally takes the skills he has acquired as an award-winning journalist and puts them to devastating use as an author. Let's talk about that quote. Let's talk about how you put these skills to devastating use. So first of all, let's talk about the newspaper skills translating over to book writing, and then let's talk about the devastating use. How do you do that?
Mostly so I could finish a book, because I had tried to write. There is a terrible version of a Newark novel buried in a drawer somewhere in there from my early 20s. One of my colleagues at the Star Ledger, who ironically went on to become Riley Sager, but this was back before they got bitten by a radioactive thriller writer, had kind of yelled at me, kind of just the obvious advice: write what you know. The way I babbled as a night cop reporter, just the way I talked to people on the phone. Riley thought that would be good fodder for narration. So I eventually stopped doing whatever it was I was trying to do with that other book and decided to write a reporter character. And I think that's one of the things I generally, kind of take advantage of writing is I meet crazy, interesting people that otherwise you might not in another job. I have interviewed, I've witnessed an autopsy. I've interviewed luchadors, right after a match. I've had more than a few run-ins with people on the wrong side of the law, police officers that have done heroic things. I've interviewed police officers in mid-scandal. You just come across a lot of the characters you want to put in these books. And I have, enough, thankfully, just been fortunate between Newark and LA, come across enough voices that you can come up with these believable characters. You come up with pastiches of sources you've made over the years, and they can become compelling. So yeah, it's almost like I get to pluck people out of reality, you transmutate them a little bit for my purposes, and you do, at least I think, hopefully create a kind of compelling world with rich and layered people.
Ooh, a compelling world with rich and layered people is a hashtag writer goals. So let's talk about how your writing skills. Did your writing as a reporter help you write shorter, tighter? Was that harder to have to create 100,000 words? I mean, what was that like to shift brains from reporter to thriller author?
I think it's a double-edged sword. I almost find myself more excited to write fiction than journalism sometimes. Not that I don't love my job, not that I don't think it's super important, but news writing is constrained. It has to be, pretty down the middle. It has to be, I get yelled at sometimes for writing like purplish prose leads because, the fiction brain takes over and bleeds back into the courtroom copy of the verdict story I'm doing that day. But you're not constrained in fiction. And also I can curse more, which I love to do. And I'm going to do my best to not do here, but 4-letter words are like half my vocabulary. So I can do whatever I want prose wise with that. The other side of it is I am so obnoxious about fact checking in real life that I sometimes don't let my imagination run wild in the crime fiction. I think my books to some extent benefit from their authenticity, but I also I have had, both of these novels. The lovely Jason Pinter at Paulus has had to chop out, me explaining exactly how a probationary hearing would work or why this piece of information would be in a prelim transcript. And she's like, people don't care about that. Like, you're only a court reporter from 9 to 5. Like, cut it out now. So it helps and it hinders, but I think it helps more. But there's still ways you trip.
You are getting people laughing already at your fondness for 4-letter words, James. I love it. And feel free to drop them. Margaret Pennard saying, hello, James Queally. Margaret joining us live from the Pacific Northwest. Margaret, welcome to the conversation. Always a pleasure to have you. Leslie saying hello from Canada. That's her signature Canadian hello. Brings me so much joy. Leslie, always a pleasure to have you. Margaret saying, Melissa saying, hi, James and Sara. So happy to join you live. Melissa, welcome from Australia. Thrilled to have you as always. Thank you for joining the conversation. Margaret saying she would love to hear about the difference in craziness from reporting writing life versus craziness from novelist writing life. Let's hear some of these crazy stories, James Queally.
So you want a crazy reporting story? I mean, yeah, I guess
Give us one of each. Give us some yummy, tasty tidbits from both of your lives.
So I did make a joke about Russell gets in dust-ups a lot more than I do at work, but I did get punched out on one of my first crime scenes in Newark back when I was a child. Not a literal child. I was like 21, but that's for reporter purposes. I might as well have been an infant. So I get called out to the scene of a double shooting midday. I'm just following a scanner report. I don't really know what's going on. And this is before, I think I was basically a post-grad intern. So I was still showing up in like suits almost to work every day, which not how it works when you do actual journalism in the actual street. So I walk up to the scene. Cops aren't talking to me. I don't have any sources yet. I don't really know what's going on, but the crowd is agitated. I can't see. I'm assuming this is, like a double homicide. This is something tragic. And just somebody is near the police tape, and they just start yelling at me. I was working for the Newark Star Ledger at the time. That was the paper I was at previously. They just start yelling, "Star Ledger, what you got?" And I'm like, what does that mean? I don't know what you're saying. I'm holding the notepad. I'm like, you asking what happened? And he goes, "Star Ledger, what you got?" And I'm smelling a little midday sauce coming off this guy. But I can't, he keeps doing this and like shoulder bumping me. And I don't really know what's going on, but I'm trying to ignore him. And some woman starts running out of the crime scene, like screaming that she saw everything. And I'm like, oh, great. I'm trying to get her attention. She's pushing past the cops. I think I'm going to get this great interview. And I hear him yell again. He goes, "Star Ledger, what you?" And he's like, "What you guys?" Screaming in the back of my head. I turn around and I go, "What?" Just right on the nose. Down I go. Down he goes.
What?
Yeah, he passed out. He was wasted, clocked me, and went down. I lose the woman who I think is my great source. I'm finally like fed up. I leave. Because I'm just like, the hell with this. Half hour later, I find out this was still sad, but not terribly newsworthy. It was a double shooting of 2 dogs that a dealer loosed on the Newark cops responding to a scene. So awful, huge dog person, not happy about that, but also not exactly the biggest story in the world. So I literally got punched in the face for sticking my nose where it didn't belong. And on top of that, I didn't get a story out of it.
Oh my God, that James, what a but yet you nevertheless he persisted in his life of crime reporting. And
Like I've written about like Proud Boys and crazy people since then and never gotten swung on, but the drunk guy in Newark is the only one to land a shot on me in an 11-year career.
that's well, lesson number one, don't go to Newark. I mean, I think we've solved this mystery.
I will dispute that, but anyway.
I'll fly out of Newark, but that is it. Melissa Watson laughing along with us. Margaret saying 4-letter words are half of your vocabulary. Where are you from again?
Fucking Brooklyn.
James joining us from the great city of Brooklyn. Don't show up in a suit. Noted. I know, because I feel like I watch Law and Order. I'm like, oh, everybody wears a suit like that. I also would show up in a suit. Margaret saying so. Apparently, reporting is a contact sport. So, have you had any other crazy interactions like this? Have you ever had to dish out the punches, James?
No, mercifully. I mean, I'm joking about the Newark thing, and that was objectively funny. Like I didn't really get hurt. Yeah, I've definitely gotten like fights in grade school worse than that. But no, I mean now, unfortunately, there's a lot more heated rhetoric towards the press. I've covered a couple of protests against vaccine mandates lately, some involving more like far-right fringe groups, a lot of protests where people are not happy with what we're doing. I had a friend from NPR get swung at a little bit at a protest a few months ago out here. I've had a few instances covering protests with the people that do kind of the anti-fascist stuff. They're wrapped up in black clothing. They get very mad when you film them in public. And while they have not been as violent towards me as the other side, they do often threaten to break cameras. It's not fun. I mean, I still love my job, but it's not, it's definitely a lot more head on a swivel, protect yourself. We're having a lot more conversations about how to defend yourself, frankly, on assignment than you maybe were 5-10 years ago. Nobody was talking about this possibility when my career started anyway, or not as much.
Wow, that is really crazy to have to think that as a member of the Fourth Estate, you now have to also take self-defense classes or be aware. I mean, that's a whole new way of thinking. How bizarre. Kathy saying hello there from Dallas/Fort Worth. Kathy, welcome to the conversation. Great to have you back. She says, James, do you ever find yourself thinking as a reporter, this is better than fiction? No one's going to believe me.
Yeah, that happens from time to time. People just engage in stupidity you wouldn't suspect. I'm trying to think what's an insane, like I didn't even want to pitch my editor kind of lunatic story lately.
Almost like an Onion-like story where you think this couldn't possibly be real life, but
yeah. The thing is, like, it's usually not funny though. Unfortunately, given my beat. Let me circle back on that.
Let's circle back, Kathy. We're going to come back. That's a good, juicy question.
I've definitely got a good answer for that. I just got to pluck it out.
You got to pluck it out. You've got to close some other tabs. We'll come back to it. Melissa would like to know, how do you know that your sources are correct? Great question, Melissa. James, you said you're a thorough, obsessive researcher even. Let's talk about that.
Mostly omnipotence, psychic power. No. I mean, yeah, you don't. Whenever you see something in a story that's, a person with knowledge of, or a law enforcement official with knowledge, or one of those, anonymous source things, like they're not, like fairies we find that just fly in through the window and give us information. It's usually somebody enmeshed in an agency you cover, or somebody else involved in a court proceeding. You would have to, you corroborate their information against other accounts, match as much of it as you can to a public record or a lawsuit or, any kind of other, other reporting on the topic. You want to make sure their details match up with other objective, unimpeachable pieces of information. It's not just like, somebody whispers in your ear, oh, the mayor, has a jetpack and is going to use it to burn the city down or something. I don't know why I'm a huge comic book nerd, by the way. So if my references are just getting absurd, that's why. But yeah, you tend to never take anything at face value. Also, when you say it's a good thing you said sources plural. General rule: you will almost never print anything from just one anonymous person, or one anonymous whatever it is. There'll be 2 or 3. You match it up. You make sure you're not just it's not coming from, or you avoid the term echo chamber. You make sure it's not all coming from the same agency or the same police unit. You try to make sure it's coming from so many places that it can't have been a kind of a coordinated leak to you.
A coordinated leak. Okay, interesting. Melissa, thank you for the question. James, thanks for the insights. Margaret saying she now wants to see crime fiction written by someone who talks with fairies. James, can we count on a fairy whisperer in your next book?
I have a weakness for like horror noir sometimes, or like high fantasy that kind of crosses into crime. So if and when I get around to trying to blend those two genres, I will pin that back for them.
Excellent. Melissa said that must take some time, yet time is of the essence to get the story out. Yeah, how does that work? I have this idea that, the clock is ticking and your fingers are typing as fast as you can to make deadline. How does that work, James?
Well, that happens. I mean, there are a lot of times something breaks. It's any kind of like natural disaster, horrible violent crime, God forbid, kind of mass shooting situation, which we find ourselves covering. Yeah, that's go, go, go. Obviously you want it to be as accurate as humanly possible, but you don't have as much time to breathe and, do as much in-depth fact checking as you might on a longer term story. But a lot of the big investigative projects I do, they can take the better part of 6 months to a year. I have something coming out this week that I'll just keep an eye out on Twitter or the LA Times website by about Wednesday, let's say. I don't really want to tip my hand beyond that, but I've been hunting that down probably since August. Couple of things I won awards for or was nominated for awards for last year, like data projects, are a lot of what I do, looking at a DA's filing rates or police misconduct stats or what have you. That stuff takes the better part of a year because math is hard and I'm a writer, which is why Ben Poston, if you're listening, does all my math for me. I do the back of the envelope crime data math, but once we got to start doing, formulas and quadratic equations and nonsense, that's his problem. But yeah, it can vary. Like you said, that whole like, oh my God, the clock is ticking, everything's on fire. That happens a lot. But
yeah.
the big projects, usually those will take months to the better part of 12 months.
Oh, wow. Okay. I did not know that. Kathy saying omnipotence as a source. I would have loved that when I was a reporter. LOL. Yes, James, we will be looking forward to seeing you cite your incredible source abilities in your future acknowledgments. I'd like to thank me for my omnipotence. Might be a good lead-in for your acknowledgments. Margaret saying great common sense on sources' opinions on the new verb both sidesing. Is that a hard line to define?
I generally still kind of identify as like the balls and strikes kind of reporter. I often use referee as the analogy for what we do, but that's the both sidesing thing. I think it oversimplifies things, but it's also not an entirely wrong-headed criticism. This is something that really in the past 4 years, I think reporters have gotten more comfortable with just saying a source or a person or an administration or whatever you're covering is lying in a story, or that they've claimed something without evidence, which I think 5 or 10 years ago, it used to just be like, the Republican said this and the Democrat said this, or the prosecutor said this and the defense attorney said this. And sometimes any of those parties might say something and they provide nothing to back it up. And if it's an outrageous claim, you can't just give it air. You have to point out that, they said the painting was stolen, but the painting was still there. But I mean, it's a simple analogy, but it often gets brought up. As a reporter, your job is not to tell me whether or not it's raining. It's to put your hand out the window and figure out which is true. I butchered that, but there is a version of that exists. But yeah, I do think there has been some of the general criticism that follows the term both sidesing is valid. I try to stay as down the middle as possible. There is sometimes when one of the two sides or three sides or four sides of a story you're involved with is engaging in horse shit, and you need to point that out.
And just so we're all clear, both sidesing is even when the story is ludicrous, telling both sides of it.
Yeah, generally, both sides. Like a good example of this would be something like climate change, right? It's giving air to, or anything that's a hoax. It's giving air to people whose side of the story is completely divorced from reality or is just totally destroyed by scientific evidence. It's not the same as, if there's it wouldn't apply to say, or largely wouldn't apply to like a debate over a piece of legislation, again, unless one side is completely engaging in fiction.
Got it. Got it. Thank you, Margaret, for the great question. James, thanks for the right there in the midst of this opinion from your daily life of having to deal with this. This is a fascinating perspective. Thank you both for that. Welcome, Melinda. Welcome, Oline. Welcome, Jennifer. Welcome, Robert. Karen, great to have you all. Thank you. I especially liked math is hard and I'm a writer. Thank you for that quote.
Don't
I,
understand.
I also do not excel at the maths. Margaret is saying is clapping for that answer. So thank you for that. Oline is saying is sharing an article. Oline, it's so great to have you here.
Thank you for that review. That was amazing.
Yay, everybody. Oline is a book reviewer for the Sun Sentinel, and she is sharing her review with us here. So everybody check that out, and I will post it later in the Mystery and Thriller Mavens Facebook group as well. So Oline, thank you for that. This is so great. James, you're getting tons of great reviews. Publishers Weekly awarding you a starred review, raving outstanding. Queally gets all the details right while populating the plot with believable characters. Let's talk about how you create those believable characters. What do you credit your time on the job with meeting such a diverse array of people? I mean, what's your secret? How do you do it?
My favorite game with these two books has been hearing from old sources in Newark and figuring out if they know which one of the characters they are a piece of, and B, when they get it wrong. I was very fortunate to meet a lot of people who taught me a lot about the universe when I got to Newark. You know, I was raised by a police officer, and that is a very helpful perspective for me to have in my life and in my reporting. But it also, you know, makes you look at the world one particular way. Being in Newark, being around members of the Black Panther Party, council people who had grown up having a very different experience with police than I did, kind of, you know, broadened my view. I wouldn't say it pushed me all the way the other direction either, but it certainly swung me out of a kind of cops and robbers worldview that I had growing up. There are Russell obviously does not have a ton of distance from me, but some of the other characters, they're definitely, you know, amalgamations of cop sources or detectives I knew among the law enforcement. A lot of people's favorite character across the two books is Kiana Jackson, who is most anybody from Newark who knows me or who followed my reporting a couple of years ago will know who that is. You know, and as we got into the second book, you know, that was written by the time I was fully enmeshed out here. That also, I will sometimes pluck people I met in LA and kind of turn them into, you know, it's never a one for one. It's never like detective whoever in real life is detective whoever in the book. But I will usually take a piece of, you know, if somebody has a certain manner of speaking or a couple of phrases I know they always use, I might borrow that or inject that into a person. Or if somebody else has, you know, I'll borrow pieces of maybe somebody's background as to how they became an activist or a prosecutor or whatnot. So I mean, you know, what's that phrase? Good writers steal, or great writers steal. I just happen to I would say liberally borrow from reality.
I liberally borrow from reality. I think that's a great quote if ever I have heard one. And thank you for that inside scoop on how you do create these characters, which Publishers Weekly is praising. Booklist also awarded you a starred review, saying Queally himself, a former crime reporter for the Star Ledger in New Jersey, brings both reporting expertise and novelistic flair to the second Avery mystery, absorbing throughout. Congratulations on that starred review. Let's talk about the novelistic flair. How do you do it, and when do you deploy it? When is it too much? Did your fearless editor Jason Pinter have to reel you in? Give us the scoop on that.
I think he was I believe there was less sometimes he calms down. Russell can talk way too much, which is my own disease. I think that goes back to some of what you were saying before, right? About having the shackles taken off from the writing style from journalism to fiction. I definitely get into, you know, I have a lot to say and I'm just going to say it mode, or what is that? You know, what's the Seinfeld Festivus thing, right? Like, you know, the airing of grievances, like sometimes I get a little bit too into that in fiction. But yeah, it also, I think I have I listened to a lot more music writing the second book than the first one. And I think there's a bit more of like a lyricism to my writing than might have been there before. I think the first book was no music. The second one was a mix of kind of calmer, more like atmospheric, maybe non-lyrical stuff in the background for the calmer scenes. And then the action scenes was a ton of hip hop. So I think that kind of braggadocio approach, especially, there's a lot of run the jewels with this record for friends of mine who know me. So Killer Mike and my reporter character both tend to talk a lot of shit, so that would explain something. But yeah, I mean, it all boils down to the action sequences. I tend to just kind of focus on, short bursts. That's where I kind of transition. I think the journalism helps. It's just, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. You don't stop to stare at like and wonder what that like bent beam in the ceiling, warehouse ceiling or whatever might mean. Like I just kind of get to that almost like don't think, just write kind of mode when in some of the tenser action sequences, especially in the backside of the book.
Ooh, interesting how listening to music, both listening to it at all versus writing in silence, could impact your writing and also the kind of music. As I will be now reading the rest of this with that in mind, wondering if I can match the songs to that mode, James. Margaret is saying she just visited your website. What a great bio, a poser hitman who never actually killed anyone. It makes me think of Lawrence Block. Does he get a place among your favorites?
Lawrence Block or the story you're referencing?
Let's go with both. Let's start with Lawrence Block.
Well, just no disrespect, but he's not one of my go-tos. Usually, big Michael Connelly fan, which has obviously been a huge honor that he has become a fan of my work. Jonathan Lethem was actually probably who got me big into crime fiction. I think I read Motherless Brooklyn when I was 16, which I probably shouldn't have been reading at that age. But that pulled me in a lot. Big Dennis Lehane guy. More recent authors, Julia Dahl writes a reporter series, or she did write a reporter series. She's now moved on to other things, but the Rebecca Roberts character definitely had some influence on Russell. Also, I might have mentioned this before, I'm a big comic book guy. So a lot of the Daredevil comics when I was in high school, because they're very crime oriented. There's a significant journalism character in those Marvel comics named Ben Urich. That stuff gets on me a lot. I sometimes think the way I narrate, the almost kind of like sarcastic, rapid fire quippiness, it looks a lot like the little yellow boxes you might see in a Spider-Man comic. So that also plays over.
I love it. Julia Dahl came on the show when the Forgotten Hours came out. She's amazing. What a brilliant, insightful, incisive book. Absolutely loved it. So great to hear that you are a fan. Margaret is also sharing your website. Everybody check it out. The link is in the comments. Margaret, thank you for posting that. Just making sure I'm not missing anybody here, scrolling through all the comments. Thank you, everybody. And yes, indeed. So very cool. Speaking of Julia Dahl, let me share her blurb from this book. She is raving that it is an elegant, fierce, and totally gripping thriller. Queally is one of the most exciting voices in crime fiction. High praise there from Julia Dahl, James. Congratulations on that. Margaret saying she's laughing and loving envisioning the witty banter as speech bubbles in the comics. I know now that is so visual. I can actually see them as well, Margaret. Leslie saying she immediately thought of Peter Parker.
There is a Spider-Man reference not that well hidden in each book. That will continue to be a thing as long as I'm writing fiction. So
we can look forward to a Spider-Man or any hero.
I think I'll keep it on task with that one, because if you start letting me go deep cut comic references, everyone's going to stop listening. So just keep it exciting.
Oh my gosh. Look at Leslie, you're picking up what James is putting down. You two are vibing because you're on that Spider-Man wavelength. Y'all, I want to remind you to get your copy of All These Ashes tonight. I'm plopping the link in the comments. So click over and grab it and buy this book from a woman-owned independent bookstore tonight. Murder by the Book, your source for all the best books and all the best interviews. Not just mine. They do amazing interviews too. So go ahead and grab a copy of all these ashes. Clearly, James is going to make you laugh. It's going to keep you entertained. And now we've all got to find that Spider-Man reference in every single book. In fact, let's find it and then we can tweet it at him. So go ahead and grab your copy now. I want to share a couple more reviews. Library Journal raving intricately plotted. Fans of Brad Parks's Carter Ross crime series, also set in Newark, will appreciate Queally's latest story featuring reporter turned investigator Avery. Let's talk about the plotting. How did you achieve this intricate plot? Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Do you write it out on big Post-it notes? Give us the skinny.
I'm an outliner. Also, good use of "give us the skinny." Nobody uses that phrase anymore around me, and I'm super happy to hear it. I am an outliner. Sometimes to nauseating detail. I will at least lay out every scene of every chapter. I usually have a paragraph or 2 paragraph summary for myself, so I don't lose my place. Most of my characters have decent bios, probably more than I ever need, but I just want them to have like a little bit of a semblance of an inner life before I start getting into them. This way, if for argument's sake, I need to know what Bill Henneman, who's the police lieutenant that Russ is in a Strange Bedfellows partnership with for most of this book. If I need to know, there's a reference to him really liking Bruce Springsteen at some point, and like that's something I just plucked out of the note file. It was like on a random wheel of like, what would this older cop listen to while we're driving to Asbury Park? Obviously, I got to make a Bruce joke here. But I'm not a pantser because I go crazy. I almost became one for this book because I had a nightmare scenario. Line of Sight came out in March 2020, and I was home right before the pandemic began. I was doing launch events in New York, and the third night, the last event I did was actually with Julia Dahl. Ironically, everything is coming together here. We're in the singularity. And de Blasio shut the city down like during my event. So I'm racing to get back to LA. Not sure, at that point, we didn't know they were going to shut down domestic air travel. And I left my laptop at the security checkpoint in Newark Airport, and I hadn't backed up my files in a week. So at that point, we had just pitched. I think we had just pitched all these ashes to Pauls. We hadn't sold it yet. I thank God had the first 10,000 words of the novel backed up in a PDF somewhere else, but I lost my entire outline.
Oh my God. You never got it back?
No. No. TSA did not find it. So either someone walked off with it or someone decided, oh, this is a Dell. It's a piece of garbage, and threw it out. It was an old Dell. I am the least tech savvy 34-year-old on earth. But so I had to re-outline the book, and I'm pretty sure the plot changed as a result because I just couldn't remember how a lot of stuff worked in the second. Like I knew the ending, I knew who did what, I knew the general and the story. This you've mentioned Law and Order before. The main homicide is a transmutation of a pretty infamous and horrible Newark murder. So that obviously I had to pull from. I had reported on that while I was at the Ledger. But the middle of the book, I kind of just forgot what happened. So I had to re-crack that, which sucked. There's really not an artful way to say it. I feel bad for my fiance. I was going relatively insane for about a month there, trying to figure out like what the hell happened here.
So what happened? You had to rewrite it from memory, this 10,000 word thing after you left it at the TSA security?
No, thankfully I had the beginning of the book saved, like the first few chapters of the book that are more or less the same in there. That was fine. But my plot map from there, especially like the second act of the book, I really didn't remember what happened. So I had to, I kind of replotted that. I think some things changed. I think they changed for the better, but I'm almost curious if I could ever find that file, if it's backed up in an email somewhere, like how we got from point A to point B to point C originally.
James, this is literally one of my nightmares. So I have backups on Dropbox. I have backups on Google Drive. I have backups on my hard drive. Then I email it to myself once a week just to be extra OCD, because it is literally my nightmare to lose my work. In stark contrast to me and apparently you, Lauren Groff once I read an interview by her, and she said she writes the entire book out. This is hard to believe, but she writes the entire book out. Then she deletes it and rewrites it from memory, claiming that face is exactly how I feel.
No.
Claiming that whatever her memory retains is what is important enough to be in it. I start sweating when I think of that.
I'm like reaching for the liquor cabinet right now hearing this. I mean, that's amazing if that works for her. I would never, question anybody's process, but no, I would not. That would not end well for me.
Yeah, good on you, Lauren Groff. I'll be over here with my 5 saved drafts. Melissa is saying, I am sure your book is a fast thrill ride. Must get my hands on it. Absolutely, Melissa. And then you need to read the first one. So I'm going to plop that one in the link plop the link to that as well. So, or should they be read in order, James?
They both function standalone. What happens in the first book kind of creates the position Russell is in at the start of the second, and the position some of the other characters. There's a political subplot, parallel plot. All of that is engineered by the first book. You don't need to know it to follow it, but it will probably give away the game of the first one if you read All These Ashes first. So it really, there's plenty to find in Line of Sight that isn't just the whodunit aspect of it, but you're probably going to know who done it if you read All These. I don't think I ever name the killer, I guess, for lack of a better term, by name in Line of Sight in All These Ashes, but your suspect list is going to narrow I can't snap my fingers. Just pretend I did that. Your suspect list is going to narrow real fast if you read the second one first.
Okay, perfect. So here's a plan. Everybody grab James's first book here.
Yeah.
And then grab the second, or treat yourself. It's the holiday season. Give the gift of a great read to your favorite, to the favorite reader in your life, or to yourself. I'm all about gift others and gift yourself. Kathy is saying nope, and double nope on the deleting the entire draft and typing from memory. Kathy, amen. Melissa is saying, yes, she will scoop up that first book. Melissa, the first book is Line of Sight. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to plop these. So the first one is The Line of Sight, and the most recent one is All These Ashes. So read them in order. Gift yourself, gift the mystery and thriller fan in your life. You are going to want to read both of these. Trust me. We would need to get our hands on these books. So I'm plopping both the links to the first book and the second book right here so you can grab them. James, thank you. Oh, Melissa's giving us a thumbs up. Yay. Melissa, get your hands on. And then let us know what you think about it. We always debrief later on all of our reads. So James, I may circle back with both constructive criticism and praise. People are laughing on Facebook. I'm just kidding. I'm sure it's all praise. James, anything that speaking of Michael Connelly, who you said you are a fan of and who has since become your fan, he raves of your first book. Line of Sight signals the start of a great career. Veteran journalist James Queally brings all his insider knowledge of the intersections of crime and police and politics and media in a story that never stands still for a single page. I'm going to pop that up briefly because James is being very mysterious. We can only see his mysterious eyes. Michael Connelly, #1 New York Times bestselling author of the Harry Bosch series. High praise to what an incredible experience that must be from being his fan to have him raving about yours. Tell us about that moment when you received that review.
I've had the good fortune of interacting with Michael a few times over the past few years, and each one was, just kind of stunning to hear him say anything nice about me because he's basically the grandmaster of modern detective fiction. I actually met him a few years earlier. Somehow I ended up on a BAFTA panel, like the British Academy of Film and TV.
Oh, interesting.
Let's pretend I got that acronym right. I was close. I was like 80% there. We ended up pretty much on a stage together answering questions from film students. This is before I'd even published my first book. They just wanted a journalist there. And he actually, did nothing. He had better things to do probably, but he actually stuck around and kind of talked me through. I kind of just had to pull him aside. I was like, I'm trying to write novels. I work at the LA Times. You pulled this off, 20, 30 years ago. How because you mentioned like switching.
Yeah.
It took me a while to figure out how to turn that switch. It's like, okay, it's 6 o'clock. I'm done with journalism. Let me eat dinner or go work out or whatever, and then start writing fiction. He kind of talked me through what motivated him to get out of that. And yeah, he's always been very, very open with advice and generous with praise in his time. And I've always really appreciated that. I mean, obviously been a huge fan of the Bosch books, just like most of the rest of the world who reads this genre. I also have a weakness for his Jack McAvoy character because, journalists, you're going to like your own. So to see him have a positive reaction for a book that, hell, I didn't know if it was ever going to get published 2, 3, 4 years ago whenever I started writing it. It's still weird to be saying this out loud right now. That it sounds like I'm making this up as I go along. It's like, no, that happened.
Really, James. So even as an award-winning journalist, it still feels surreal and exciting.
It's surreal, it's exciting, and it's still nerve-inducing. I was convinced the second book was awful. I feel like a lot of writers think that, they say the
Curse of the Sophomore or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. When I turned in the first draft of that, I was like, well, this sucks. Hopefully Jason likes me. And apparently I was wrong about the first part. I think he likes me. But yeah, so getting praise from Michael, getting praise for somebody like Sean Cosby, who I've looked up to for a minute. Blacktop Wasteland was amazing a year ago. His first book, My Darkest Prayers, or his first crime novel.
Razorblade Tears. Yeah.
Razorblade Tears is great. Yeah. I figured that one is the hype train has left the station on that one. So I went back further in the
hype train,
the bibliography.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, all these people that I've looked up to with the praise it's been phenomenal, and I can't thank them enough.
Yay. Mike O'Neill, welcome to the conversation. Always a pleasure to have you, sir. Chiming in saying Jason Pinter is great. Jason Pinter is great. He's been on the show twice for his books. And he is always such a great guest and a great guy. So good to know that you've had a good experience with him as your editor. Mike, great to have you as well. Well, y'all, it looks like we have time for about 1 or 2 more questions. We're almost out of time, but I bet we can fit one or two more in for the speed round. So get those questions going. Meanwhile, I will ask James, what do you want people to leave your books, learning, feeling, having experience? What do you want them to walk away from your pages with?
I think it's, the understatement of the year is we live in polarizing times. And I write normally about groups that are constantly in conflict, be it law enforcement, the media, criminal justice reform activists, people that are, on the wrong side of the law, but maybe trying to do better. These are groups that normally don't understand each other. A lot of criticism I hear about press comes from a place, it seems, more of ignorance than actual frustration. And I don't mean that in an insulting way, but more you just don't know how it works. I find that often every day I make assumptions about policing that I'm wrong about, or I make assumptions about defense work that I'm wrong about. I might make assumptions about people that have, defendants in cases that I'm wrong about. There's a lot of entangled, conflict between these groups, and a lot of people just judging groups instead of individuals. And I one of the best pieces of praise I felt like I got for Line of Sight I love the star reviews, and I'm super glad that Michael Connelly loved my work, but it was a law enforcement officer who shall remain nameless, but somebody who pretty much read it and was like, they had a much different opinion of protesters, of groups like Black Lives Matter before, and they'd never really thought about what it was like being on the other end of a gun and a badge. And like, this person certainly did not suddenly, retire from policing or anything, nor would that have been my aim, but it at least opened up their worldview of a group that they otherwise had an antagonistic relationship with. And I sometimes hear that going the other direction as well. And maybe that's just the reporter in me that we try to, like I said, referring to us as referees. But I just hope if you go into these books and you have a really deeply negative opinion of one of the main groups in that intersection that gets talked about, right? Police, media, protesters, what have you. I just hope you know that what I'm pouring into those characters is from my real lived experience with those groups. And I hope it maybe just makes you look at them in a slightly different light. You don't have to like them, but maybe you try to understand them a little better, because that's kind of what I think makes the books work. Is I'm not on any of these teams. I don't really spare the press either. I slap around my industry with reckless abandon in these books. With apologies to any editors reading this, none of them are you.
Yeah, exactly. Those I definitely
made up because I like being employed.
Exactly. Welcome to the conversation, Nancy and Jen. Great to have you both here. Jane as well. Welcome, Kathy, Benjamin, Carol. So great to have you all. Thank you so much for joining. Sue, thanks for coming. Yeah, I think that I think my favorite thing about reading is the chance to walk in someone else's shoes through the pages of this book, to be in their lived experience, to see the world through their eyes and through their lived experience. And what an extraordinary opportunity that always is, but especially now when we're having this reckoning and this moment of both polarization and also greater understanding than I think we've ever reached before, on both sides. So James, what a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for coming on tonight, joining us from LA for all of these, the inside scoop on both your life as a reporter and as a writer. Thank you, mystery and thriller fans, for joining us. And I will see you next Monday night for hashtag Mystery Mondays, because Mondays can be murder. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks for having me. Bye.